Okay. Anyway, it's very exciting to be back with our first talk of 2021. And we're really grateful to Ruth McIntosh, for coming to do this first talk for us. Ruth gave us a talk back last August time. That was based in England and Scotland, I think. And today we're in France, which is fabulous. So we can all hopefully feel the warmth as we look at these photos. We'll do our usual, we'll break at 10 to 11, and then we'll have a 20-minute break, and we will come back at 10 past 11. So, Ruth, we can already see your first postcard. That's lovely. Bienvenue à Bordeaux. So over to you, Ruth. And also, I should say a welcome to people watching this on the YouTube, because this is being recorded and will be available soon. Okay. Thanks, Ruth.
Okay, so hello and welcome everybody. Bienvenue à Bordeaux. So I'm going to be talking today about 3 trips. One is right the way across France on the Canal du Garonne and the Canal du Midi. Another is down from Bordeaux to Biarritz, and the third is in and around the vineyards of the vineyards of Bordeaux. Okay, so a little bit about me. I like to write very much about travel and about people, so those are my 2 big topics. I offer copywriting and life writing services, and I have a blog called slowcycle.com. So it's www.slow-cycle.com, and that's my writing all about travelling around Europe on a bike, and the UK as well. So if anyone's interested in life writing or anything like that, give me a call. I work by Zoom, so this is ideal. So Slow Cycle, just a bucket kind of list of inspiration, hopefully, for staycations and bike tours, with a focus on experiential travel, and you'll get more of my philosophy today as I go on. GoodAppleCopy.com is writing non-fiction books, life writing, brand storytelling, so helping people to tell their business story, and English tuition. So in lockdown, I've written a little book with some friends from Leicester and other places about women who cycle. It's a book of short stories, and it covers 12 different women's stories who cycle, including Susan Durham and Indigo Forest and Mariam Amatullah, all these ladies from Leicester, and all 3 are in Cycling UK's Top Women in Cycling. And that's top women for participating, for helping other women, not for performance, although, you know, they're pretty sporty as well. If you want to contact me about any questions at all after the talk, that's my email, ruthmcintosh9@gmail.com. And if you'd like a copy of the book about these ladies, you're very welcome to get in touch with me. It's aimed at beginners or people who are new to cycle touring, but it's got a few tips, it's got a few bits of kind of experience, things that we've learned along the way. So it's not supposed to be a sort of technical book, but it's a bit of fun. There's also some stuff on choosing a bike for touring specifically and getting started, if that's what you're interested in. So if anyone's got any questions throughout the talk, if you want to use the chat, I'll do my best to follow with the chat. Might struggle a little bit, but we'll see how we get along. Okay, so the first tour that I want to talk about, biking from Bordeaux, is going to cover the Domaine, which is east from Bordeaux along the Garonne River to the Canal du Midi and the Mediterranean coast. You can finish at Sète or Narbonne or anywhere you'd like, really. More on that later. So it takes roughly 10 to 12 days, depending what pace you're traveling at, and that's 500 kilometers. Okay, so as you can see, there's some chat going on here. So, oh, okay, some people have already got the book, so that's great. Thank you very much, Wendy, and hope to catch up with you later. So the second bike tour I'm going to talk about today is biking from Bordeaux to the south and west along the coast to Biarritz. That's my daughter there. She was 11 when we did this trip. This is called the Velo Odyssey, and it covers the Bay of Arcachon, Dunes de Pilat, Biscarrosse, Mimizan, Lyon, Hossegor, Cap-Breton, Bayonne and Biarritz. I'll cover where we actually got to. We actually meandered on this one, which is hence the title of the presentation. And we went to a town called Dax, which I absolutely loved, and more on that later. Take you roughly 7 days for a beginner. Both of these two tours are completely flat, so they are suitable for electric bikes, accessible vehicles, all that kind of thing. This one is 200 kilometres. A third tour I'm going to talk about today is just a local tour out of Bordeaux to Saint-Emilion and wine country. East of Bordeaux, we've got a little circular route, 3 or 4 days, very leisurely, give you a chance to have a look around, and that's roughly around 100k. So, and that's just an overview of the 3 tours I'm going to talk about today. I've got there lots of different times. I've been 4 times in total, by either bus or aeroplane. I've been there twice on the European Bike Express. Here I am on the first trip with my friends Joanne and Nikki, and I've been there 2 times by plane from East Midlands. That would be Flybe, and it's very reasonable. Once you arrive at the airport, there are 2 buses from the airport. There's a bendy bus, which is €2 and extremely busy, stopping all the way through Bordeaux, picking up locals. And then there's an express non-stop city bus, which is roughly €10. I've never taken the express bus just because the bendy bus turned up first. But if you are a bit travel sick, I probably wouldn't recommend it. Last time we went on, it was quite funny, but it wasn't. A young girl had been drinking some orange juice and she managed to projectile decorate the person opposite her whilst on the bus. So it can make you feel a bit funny. It's bumpy and a bit of an experience. So this bus takes you to the centre of Bordeaux. You travel all the way through the centre of Bordeaux and arrive at the Gare Saint-Jean, which is on the eastern side of the city and connects with the rest of France. We stay near the Gare Saint-Jean. This is the Café du Levant, which I've been to a few times. Here's my daughter doing her thing. She's a dancer, you can tell, can't you? So we tend to stay the night. If I arrive on a Sunday, it's a very cheap flight, but it tends to be later in the day, so I stay near the station before getting the bikes on the Monday. The place where I hire the bikes from when I fly is nearby to this. So chance to explore the centre of Bordeaux. Many of you may have been there. You'll know that the streets are close together. There's a lot to look at, beautiful architecture over the years from the, I don't know, 15th century, a lot from the 18th century. A rather spectacular bridge called Pont du Père, and a very nice walk along the riverside. My favourite thing is to walk up the riverside rather than trudging streets. By the riverside, you can see the Place de la Bourse, and there's a new installation which is Le Mirror d'eau, which means you can take your shoes off and paddle about, and then there's fountains every now and again which creates mist and a cool kind of breeze down by the city. I know it's difficult to imagine now as we are in January, but when we last went to Bordeaux it was 40 degrees and there was an extreme heat warning, so it can be extremely warm, and by the river here is a nice place to go. You've got antique markets. A friend of mine, June, bought a teapot here once and carried it all the way across France. Food markets, free dance lessons, which we had to go at. It tends to be Latin salsa and live music and entertainment. So going back to the first trip, Le Mer, this trip was one which I first went on in 2014 with the wonderful Indigo Kelly Forrest and Susan Dorham from Leicester Women's Velo and Breeze and British Cycling. They're just generally advocates for women's cycling and getting women to get to the next level in their cycling and tour together. So this goes east along the Garonne to the Canal du Midi and the Mediterranean coast. You can take as long as you like over it. The story of this trip, why it started, was Indigo Kelly Forrest did it in 2009 with her friend when she was much larger than she is now. She was a size 24 and she was only making sort of 10 to 20 miles a day at best, but it kind of changed her, and after that she decided to offer this tour for others. It's a kind of baptism, if you like, an introduction to cycling, and a great time to go in the summer. So it's mostly off-road along the canal paths and on dedicated cycle tracks, so there's not much traffic or no traffic really. Goes through some large cities, but when you're on your bike you actually probably prefer the bits in between most, the smaller little villages and towns. If you get stuck for any reason, or you're going with friends who aren't cycling, they could either go on the canal, hiring boats, or you could return to Bordeaux or get to parts along the journey by train. So it's approximately 500k. I cut this a little bit short, starting in Bordeaux, which is at the head of the Garonne River, and finishing I finished in Carcassonne the first time, and we actually also went and met in Narbonne. You can carry on up the coast in the Mediterranean to Sète, or you can go down towards Spain. So we tend to do 50 to 90 kilometres a day, depending on whether it's the first day or middle day, how people are feeling, and also getting lost. If you get lost, you're always gonna do more miles. So I'm afraid I'm struggling to see the chat. Okay, I think that's just technical things, so I will just move on from the chat. Okay. So that's the route, 500 miles, and it's frozen. Okay, next. So the first day is always a short day, and we go to a place called Crayon. It's probably less than 20k out of Bordeaux. The reason for this is you need to get your bike legs, you need to get your balance, because riding a bike with 10 kilograms or 15 kilograms of luggage is different. In fact, one year I got off the bike bus in Bordeaux and had my straps dangling and had a bit of a tumble. So here we are getting ready to go on the adventure, or finishing an adventure maybe, in 2014. So Indigo calls this the Women's French Adventure, or WFA for short, and we'll meet by this Blue Lion on the west bank of the Garonne, which is just over Pont de Paix, and it's on the opposite side of the city to most of the commercial tourism. So you're going east along the cycle track out of Bordeaux, and it's a short ride. It's not too far to go. There's the Place de la Bourse, and you can see that Place de la Bourse is near to the Pont de Paix, and once you get over the Pont de Paix, you essentially go left and you are on your way. The whole piste cyclable is signposted by these green signs in France. It's blue signs in England and green signs in France, and the route that I was going on was Sauveterre to Garonne. So second day is Crayon to Meillan-sur-Garonne. Don't know if I've said that right. After Crayon, the track goes from a sort of a railway on the Roger Lapperby cycle track, named after a 1937 French, what do you call it? That race in France. You know, that big one. The Tour de France, named after a cycle, a winner in 1937. This track is, you go along there, and then it undulates through woods and rolling hills, and it's my favourite day of the journey, day 2. There's more to the landscape you can see there, but when I'm on my bike, I'm, you know, cycling, so I apologise, I haven't got the best photographs in the world. And this is us stopping at La Réole, which is almost at the end of the journey, and eating the French way. This means you can go to a cafe, order drinks from a cafe, and then we were allowed to order food from other places. So over the road, there was somewhere selling chicken, somewhere selling pizza, somebody went to the patisserie, and we all sat down and ate and drank different kinds of things. So this is the French way of eating, sitting down and eating. When you go to France and you are on a bicycle tour and you go to a boulangerie and you eat standing up, people will come up to you in the street and tell you that you're doing the wrong thing. No, 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 this is not the French way. You must sit down, you know, and take your time. So, you know, when you've done most of your miles for the day, it's nice to sit and take your time. And starting to get into the French way came very easily to me. So you can see there we've got quite a lot of stuff. That's Nikki on the left, and ladies that I cycle with, including Susan from Leicester on the right. Along the Canal du Midi, that's Indy in the middle. This is the typical landscape. So that's a kind of, you know, idea of the terrain that we're covering. So it's not technical terrain at this point, and the only uphills are junctions with roads or bridges. You can get water and snacks and use the restroom along the way at marinas and cafes. So even in the heat of August, it's okay. You don't want to exert yourself too much, so just go at a steady pace, because the heat can really sap you, and it's best to get your miles in the shade if you can. So sad thing about the Canal du Midi is that it won't always look like this. The plane trees which run along the Canal du Midi will actually have to be chopped down in a few years' time to spread, to stop this infection in the tree. So if you're thinking of going and would like to see it as its best, maybe go before that very sad thing happens. Here we go, just another sort of idea of what you can find along the Canal du Midi or the Garonne. Actually, this is the Garonne. I'll show you on a map later where the Midi and the Garonne meet in Toulouse. If I had to choose between the two and just do one, I think the Garonne is nicer, and the terrain is much better maintained. One day I came to a bit of a grinding halt, and instead of camping with the rest of the ladies, I sent them a text message and stayed with this couple on the right at a chambre d'hôte, which is a French B&B. It was really a lovely experience. We went to a garlic soup festival. These people are probably in their late 70s or 80s, but they were so vibrant and brilliant at speaking English and had so many friends and so hospitable. It was really incredible. And I think that garlic soup is probably you know, some kind of cure for long living and good living. So this is their house. It's not a bad little place. You can see why I was drawn in. After a hot afternoon cycling along the canal, this is where I landed. This is not a typical night's sleep. Normally we're in the tents, but for one night I decided I'd had enough. I looked down the drive of this place and decided that I wanted to stay. Halfway through the journey, maybe 2 or 3 days into the journey, my bike on the left has got the 4 panniers that I set out with, and probably quite a lot of food in there and junk. Now, with it being so hot that year, I call this picture de chevaux. I really didn't have the power in my legs to carry all that weight, and I decided to throw away the front 2 panniers and some extra stuff that I had, an old waterproof and an old fleece, because I thought I'd not need them that year. It was just too hot. And you can see on the right, when I got to Mozac, I got much less to carry. So a tip that I give is always less if you can. Obviously, the more you pay to stay in accommodation or eat food out, the easier it is. But there's also a joy in camping. And it's a bit of an art form. So that's the difference in my bike from a slow day, a hot day, to a cooler day, and I sorted myself out. I was in a much better shape the next day, and I pumped up the tyres and cleaned the chain and stuff like that had been and not got around to the day before. So along the whole of this route, there are, I think they're called Bastide towns. I'm not sure if this is a Bastide town, but there's fortifications up on the hill above the canal at Valence d'Argent, where we climbed up for a little detour. We had our lunch in the shade of this grain market, and wasn't many people around the town. So we did wonder where everybody was until we got to a town square where everyone was having set menus at local cafes. And really, this is probably the best thing to do in France, is to go and have a set menu and to take your time over lunch when it's the heat of the day. So we never really got to grips with that, but maybe we should do. It's something that I'm getting better at as I go for different tours, as I'll show you. So here we are at Mozac, halfway through, more or less, dining in the cathedral square with other pilgrims, because this is on the route of one of the caminos that goes from France to Spain. So there's quite a lot going on in the town, very picturesque town. It's in the area of Tarn et Garonne, which has got lots of different canals and rivers, which I'll show you later. So here are the routes of one of the caminos that runs obviously a network across Europe. These are different ways in, all going to that place on the end, which I'm sure lots of you have been to, the end of the Camino. It's just escaped my memory. But here you can see Mozac is on that route, on one of those routes. Bordeaux, obviously, further to the east, a big hub for a lot of traffic going east, or a lot of transport links going east. And the 5th largest city in France, but probably one of the nicest to live in. So back to Mozac again. On the left is the bike that I used on my first tour. It's just a mountain bike with front suspension. It's quite heavy, but I haven't got too much on it, hopefully, in that tour. And in the background, I've circled the other bank of the river opposite the town of Mozac, and that's where we camped, the campsite. So as you can see there, you've got a lake, you've got canals, you've got rivers. There are different levels of viaducts and bridges everywhere. It's a kind of engineering an engineering marvel, if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in. So on the right there, just a picture of some of the canals through town. So here is a little graph or a little map of where the Garonne meets the Midi at Toulouse. This is a part of the route where I always make sure I'm with somebody who knows where they're going, like Indigo, because it's more difficult in a city to navigate your way just following the signs. It can be done, But obviously with more people around and more junctions, it can be more complicated. So I tend to go along with some other people here. Toulouse is a lovely city in parts. We stayed together when we were in Toulouse and went to a bike cafe. Doesn't have a great reputation for crime. Obviously, it's a city which has some poverty, but we've never had any problem there. We stick together, pass through the city and out the other side. One of my friends, Joanne, got lost coming out of Toulouse on the way to a place called Les Violettes, and she had quite a funny story, which is in my book, about kind of getting lost. And sometimes it's getting lost that makes the trip. But next place along where we stayed was Castle Naudray, which was a beautiful town, big canal basin. Now you're in the east of France. You're in the kind of southeast, going towards Carcassonne, and different kind of landscape. It becomes a bit more rolling, and it's very cheap, very reasonable prices. It's less touristy in some ways, just here. So we camped in most places. This is one of my favourite campsites in 2014, next to the sunflowers. And it was probably the best year for weather because it was cooler with a bit of drizzle. We can't see it here, but it was a lot cooler, about 24 degrees, which was perfect for cycle touring. So in 2016, I went on the road to avoid the bumpy terrain. So as I said before, as you get further to the east of the Canal du Midi towards Carcassonne, the route becomes bumpy because of the trees. The trees and the roots uproot the path, and the path's not so well maintained. There are different regions every time you go over a boundary in this tour. You know, you notice the difference to the maintenance of the terrain. So we actually went on the road the second time I went, and I preferred that. It was a beautiful ride, and not dangerous either, just on the back roads. This is again the first time that we went. You see a difference in the weather, sort of greener, a bit cooler. Carcassonne is extremely spectacular. We had a guided tour and I was told all the information about it, and it went in one ear and out the other, I'm afraid. But a lot of tourists go and marvel at it. Americans go. It's the sort of backdrop to many a Hollywood movie. It used to be a kind of fictional place, but it really is kind of magical, and obviously it's well preserved heritage site. So the walls of the city there look out onto the plain, and then there's mountains all around. So if you want to cycle further, you can cycle up around the mountains at any point on this route. There's a place that you can stay in Carcassonne. One year we stayed in the campsite there. Basically, we don't always know exactly where we're going to stay. We usually do, but if you turn up at a French campsite, they usually will squeeze you in if you're on a bike, because green tourism has a discount, and it has a kind of they give you a kind of special status, if you like, and take pity on you. So this is the end of the trip, or the beginning of the trip, depending on which way you're going. For us, it was the end one year and the beginning another. So Narbonne is a city just on the gateway, really, to the Mediterranean. Some of the ladies cycled all the way down to the Med, but for me, I was sort of close enough. So I stopped there. Carcassonne, Sir Claire Scott says, Carcassonne's a popular board game. So I imagine that might attract a certain type of tourist. Maybe Claire can catch us up on that in a minute, because I'm going to stop 1 minute. Nearly at the end of this, Narbonne, as I said, is the end. So we all gathered together, and now I've got the end of part one. So Patricia, I'll hand over to you. again. So the second ride I want to talk about is called the Velo Odyssey. It's part of the Eurovelo one that runs all the way from southwest England through Roscoff all the way down through Brittany and the East Coast. But I picked it up obviously in Bordeaux. So this route that I did, it would be 200 kilometres if you did it the whole way from Bordeaux to Biarritz. I actually started in Arcachon, but more on that later. So it's on the west coast from Bordeaux towards the Atlantic and the Bay of Arcachon. And it takes roughly 7 to 10 days. You can do whatever you like, really. Some people might do it in a day and then fall over in the shower and bang their head. But they might take as long as they want. It's mostly off-road and you'll see the terrain later. It goes over the Dunes du Pilat, which is a large natural mountain made of sand, which runs all the way along this coastline. And through pine forests. You've got surfing and sailing en route, so it might be popular with anyone who's got also sailing enthusiasts in the family, or surfers or canoeists or whatever it is. So it takes in a different part of France, where France becomes the Pays Basque and finishes at Biarritz. So you can get back to Bordeaux by train, or obviously you can cycle back. It's entirely up to you. So again, like the other route, it has that support of the train line, which is something that I use. So I went with my daughter to on this trip, and we started in Bordeaux by flying over. This is what we took, all our camping gear. This is absolutely everything. Just for the nerds out there, I know my sister might be watching. She's just started cycle touring, so she's getting all her kit together, which is very exciting. So on the left, on the blue mat, that is my stuff. I actually borrowed that mat from Endeavour. Endeavour is a brilliant organisation. Take really deprived kids from Burngreave in Sheffield, who are often kind of new refugees to the country, on kind of trips or just outdoor in the environment, and we educate kids who nobody else will take in, because they've got all sorts of learning needs or behaviour needs, or they're new into the country and they need additional support. So anyway, that blue bag's from Endeavour. Inside it, I've just got a few bits and bobs. My tent's the green thing. I've got a sleeping mat, an air mattress. Bag of clothes is the red bag, and then I've got toiletries and a kind of camping kitchen kit. On the right is my daughter's stuff. So you can see she's got very little, because she was only 11. I didn't want her to carry very much. So that's the kit list, and this is getting nerdy again. This is the camping kit. This is the kitchen. Yeah, and yeah, we had a lot of baguettes with I don't know, anything really, beef, tomatoes, and tuna and stuff like that. Basic food. Usually have breakfast, croissant, something like that, and lunch out on the road. So when we went to Bordeaux this time, it was in a heat wave, and we had 2 weeks to do this route. So I had lots of spare time, which we used to get acclimatised. The reason for this was really it was 40 degrees and not really conducive to cycling. But we did do some acclimatisation by cycling around the Bay of Arcachon in the pine forests behind the town, and just getting used to being on the bikes. I only had one sort of near miss when my daughter slammed on the brakes because a snake went across the road, and I nearly crashed into the back of her. We both nearly fell off, but we didn't, because we weren't going particularly fast. So tip would always be to not get too close to the person in front of you and not go too fast, just in case something does happen. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So here's the Bay of Arcachon. You could spend a whole week here. It's a huge French seaside resort specialising in seafood, oysters, lots of oyster shacks, and a beautiful beach, kind of Victorian resort, if you like, seaside resort, and quite a lot to do here. Quite a large area around the Bay of Arcachon itself would be, I don't know, maybe 30 kilometres, maybe more, just doing that ride. So here's the sort of front where all the expensive restaurants are. It's a very well-to-do French seaside resort. People from all over the place, but mostly French domestic tourists. So we started to actually cycle on the third day we were there. We'd been to a water park and done acclimatisation and stuff like that. And then we had a nice misty day, and we cycled from Arcachon to Biscarrosse over the Dune de Pilat. No, there's no pictures of going over the dune here, I'm afraid, because it was hilly and I didn't stop to get my camera out. This is a hire bike this time. Both of these two trips I'm talking to in this segment are hire bikes from Bordeaux Bikes, and they're the same kind of spec as my own bike, just a sturdy touring bike, really. And they also supply the panniers and the front box. So everything's fully supplied by Bordeaux Bikes, so you can just take a bit of kit on the plane, as I showed you earlier. So here is the lake at Biscarrosse. I didn't really know this about the terrain before I got there, but you've got a mixture of beaches and Atlantic coast terrain, and next to the Atlantic coast, and then you've got inland freshwater lakes. And actually we ended up preferring the freshwater lakes because there's more shade, there's less kind of exposure to the wind, and it was you know, very safe place to be. Lots of French families, lots of very large French campsites, all sorts of different kinds of pine lodges, accommodation to stay in. This is called Slow Village at Biscarrosse Lac, which I liked the name of because I'm a slow fanatic, of course. So next one. This map on the left shows you most of the trip that we did on it's along the red line here, which I'm indicating with my arrow that we should have been travelling with Bordeaux up here in the north. So the second day of our ride, second proper day of actually cycling, we were supposed to go from A here around this lake to B. Unfortunately, when I got a stomach ache and I had to stop by the side of the road and be rescued by some gypsies. Some ladies who were gypsies stopped and gave me some antispasmodic stuff because I had a stomach ache, and helped me but because I kind of collapsed halfway through this route and felt very ill, so we went back to their encampment, the gypsy encampment, and sat outside the caravan for a bit, had a bit of water. My daughter played with the children, and then we started going again. But instead of ending up back on the Atlantic coast, we ended up going inland to B2, which was a place called Yushu. And I was pretty much okay about that. Decided to get the train, and we got the train, and we ended up that night in a place called Dax. So even though we had a route here planned, we ended up doing something completely different. And we were going to go at this point all the way to Biarritz, Bayonne or Biarritz in the south, which is D, and to the bottom, and then work our way back up. But we ended up staying in Dax because there was a massive dance festival in Bayonne, and all the accommodation there was very busy. And in Biarritz, President Macron and his cronies were there with all of their security guards and guns and what have you, patrolling the beaches, looking rather menacing apparently, because there were so many elite French people there. We decided that we would give Biarritz a miss with it being so busy. We knew it would be busy. And we found this amazing spa town called Dax, which is the kind of French equivalent to Harrogate or York or Bath or something like that. And it was got a fantastic kind of 1920s architecture. So here's my daughter, looking cute as ever in Dax. We had a nice hotel here, not the posh one you see in the middle and on the left, but a very comfortable one, a French hotel with carpet on the walls. Very strange, but very comfortable. So Dax itself was somewhere that we really enjoyed. It was a little gem, and we decided we would stop cycling, 40 or 50k for that next day and explore instead. So that's what we did. Found the market, started to get a flavour of it being slightly different in terms of produce available, and there's a kind of pride in them being more kind of Basque. At that point, there were lots of people staying in Dax who were going to Bayonne and Biarritz, all dressed in white tops and white jeans with a red necker to go and take part in a festival, a massive music and dance festival, which felt more like a kind of, Basque or Spanish thing to do. So it had a kind of slightly different flavour about it when you get towards Dax. So the following day we went down towards D, back to the Atlantic coast at the bottom of the route, and started to make our way back up, going through Cap Breton, which is a very swanky sailor resort. And as you can see, most of the terrain is shaded by the pine trees and looks much like the picture on the right there. So that's typical kind of trail terrain. On the left, is another kind of square in centre of a town where there are fountains and mist in the day. So if you want to sit in the shade and have your lunch, you are cooled by the mist. We ventured onto the beach for a minute or so, but I was just so overwhelmed by the heat that I felt it would be nicer to get back on the bike. So as you can see, very, very flat. Along the coast, all the way to Host-Segur, I think. And there are lots of inlets and marinas, massive yachts, very sort of swanky stuff. There are rental places here where you can hire bikes or do different kinds of water sports. But we just carried on with the bikes. And lots of bridges and kind of inlets to go in and out of following the route. We ended up that day here near Leon Lac, which is another inland water lake, freshwater lake. So again, a kind of preferred environment really for me than the beach, because it was less exposed at that time of the year. We found a really cheap camping here, about 20 euros, which is, 15 quid. And a very friendly lady with children and a dog, and, really lovely atmosphere. And it was just somewhere to chill out, really. This is a kind of typical unglamorous camp scene to show you what the campsite's like and to show you my tent. This tent is the best tent in the world for bike touring, I think. It's spacious enough. I get claustrophobic, so wouldn't like anything too small. It fits the two of us. I can bang in 4 tent pegs and it's good to go. It takes me about 10 minutes to put up, maybe less. So it's a great tent to put up and take down every day. Back to the path, we've got typical terrain again. So this is the kind of terrain of the piste, the whatever you call it, the Eurovelo, all the way along through pine forests, and it kind of undulates up and down. You go over what's effectively the Dune du Pilat, many times kind of traversing it along the route, which makes it a bit more interesting. and you can't see the ocean all the time. You usually can see forest, or you're going towards kind of towns and more rural landscapes, going, you know, past places where you can buy food and stuff like that, because along the coast itself, it's kind of down the bottom of a shelf. It's not got very great access, and it's difficult to get fresh water and stuff like that. The camp sites and car parks tend to be maybe a kilometre or so inland from the coast itself. So here's Mimizan Plage. Give you some idea of what the coast is like all the way along there. Can be quite good surfing territory. Obviously, that reflects the fact that the Atlantic's creating these large waves, which, you know, are great for a period of time, but for hours on end, it can be quite tiring if you're also cycling. So this is an early morning zip. Have to either sort of cycle and get active early morning till about 1 or 2, or later in the day. So had to be sort of just aware of where we are and what we're doing, because Englishmen and mad dogs and all that. So this is the end. Back to one of the lakes before we went to Bordeaux again. Our budget for the trip was around 50 to 120 euros per day, which was for 2 of us. So obviously, you know, that was quite reasonable. A campsite was 26 euros minimum, up to 40 euros. Obviously, they would have laundry facilities, entertainment, swimming pools, all sorts of things. So municipals also very good. Some of them also have swimming pools, but you know, there was a range that we went to. Hotels were between 60 and 100 euros. Stayed in hotels in the 2 weeks for about 4 nights in total, because this region of France, you get a lot of storms in the summer, so you get very intense heat, and then you get very intense storms because the heat builds up and releases. So something to maybe think about if you're planning a trip, that you might get that kind of weather, and that you might have to adjust your plan for that. Okay, so that is that trip. And the last trip we're going to talk about today, very quickly, is just going around Bordeaux. So we went from Bordeaux another time with a friend up to Saint-Emilion. So, you know, just to show that Bordeaux is somewhere you can start a large tour, or go as part of a large tour, go for a shorter period, or go for even sort of a long weekend. So this is a long weekend. Starting east along my favourite track and going up past Crayon to the Dordogne. So this is a rougher kind of itinerary. We went on the cycle track up towards Libourne, which is a very ordinary French town, which is a cheaper place to stay than Saint-Emilion itself. We had a day around Libourne and a day back to Bordeaux. So, as I said before, this is my favourite part of the route. A favourite part of any cycling route ever is west out of Bordeaux. So you first of all got this field on the right, and then as you go up towards the Dordogne and Saint-Emilion itself, you've got these incredible vineyards and their mansions, chateau, whatever. This is where we stayed. I think it was called Arbre Rouge, like the red tree. Like, I think that name's come back to me. Very kind of cool designer place. This is Saint-Emilion itself, which was a whole day trip. I think we cycled about 30 or 40k this day. Saint-Emilion itself is a very condensed village, so it kind of folds in on itself. It's absolutely immaculate. There are lots of terraces and gardens and public areas that you can walk through. The main centre of the town itself seems to be hewn out of other bits of rock and out of and there are houses built all around a kind of very kind of steep area. Saint-Emilion. So as you can see, it's very easy to get around. It's another kind of UNESCO heritage site. A whole day really. You can go have the set meal, have a nice meal in the centre of town. You can visit a vineyard if that's your thing. I personally don't like to go and taste if I'm not buying, because I think that it's a bit rude. But I don't know. If you like buying wine, I guess that would be somewhere that you might go. Wine's not really my thing, but you can get all kinds of budgets and tastes there. So it's a very kind of, desirable thing to do for some people if you're into wine. So it's kind of offering you this exclusive experience on the right, the manor. And on the left, you can see the kind of level of development over the ages that's gone on here. So it's just an example of what it's like in the centre of town. You've got the buildings on buildings on buildings and a very kind of interesting town centre. It can be quite busy. It wasn't too busy in July when we went. I'm not sure what it would be like in August. Alternatively, very ordinary French town. This is just a more typical. We had a day here in Libourne and a meal out. Very reasonable, set meal. Everybody in the town seemed to be there having the same thing. And this is where we stayed. This day I was having a bit of a meltdown. It was too hot, and then we found this place, and in I splashed. I felt like I had arrived at this point. I call it my Joan Collins moment, because it's like you're not you when you're hungry. It's like the Snickers advert. I was feeling a bit grumpy at that point. So yeah, somebody's got their sound on, but never mind. Okay, so coming to the end now, back to Bordeaux. There's a freshwater lake, back on the track again to the end of the route and back to the cafe at Saint-Jean before departing to the airport. So just want to chat a little bit about the book before I turn over to questions. So just to recap the book, it's available from me. If you would like to get in touch, that's the best way of getting in touch, through my email, which is ruthmcintosh9@gmail.com. So if you're interested in brand storytelling or life writing, or just working one-to-one on some writing on Zoom, then obviously I can accommodate you there. My new product is the life writing, and I'm going to be offering 2 books a year. Because it's such an investment in terms of time. So it would take 3 to 6 months for me to write a book based on 6 to 10 interviews with you and some of your memoirs and photographs, and put them together. And it will be something for you to pass on and enjoy with your family, and to capture a life well lived for future generations, as well as writing up our interviews. Obviously they're recorded, so you'd have the option of letting people have access to those. So that's a new product, the life writing. The book itself here is aimed at beginners, people who are new at cycle touring. It's also about the sort of psychology of the women who tour and what cycling does for them. So that's that.